There comes a moment when you've done all you can do. You've prayed, you've pushed, you've cried, and you've fought. But I came to tell somebody today, it's time to leave it to God. There is a weight you've been carrying, a burden pressing so heavily on your shoulders that it feels like it's become a part of you. You wake up with it. You go to sleep with it. It follows you into conversations, into your workplace, into your relationships. It lingers in your thoughts when you're alone, creeping in during the quiet moments when nobody else can see the silent war you're fighting. It's really that simple to be final. You smile in front of others, but deep down, you're exhausted mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. You've been holding on to pain that was never meant to define you. You've been clinging to situations you cannot control, outcomes you cannot predict, and people you cannot change. You've tried to fix it. You've tried to reason with it. You've tried to outthink it, but nothing seems to move, and the more you try, the heavier it becomes. We live in a world that tells us to push through, to stay strong, to figure it out. But let me tell you, there are some things human strength cannot carry. There are some battles human wisdom cannot win. There are burdens so heavy that they will break you if you continue to carry them alone. That heartbreak you've been nursing, that disappointment that keeps replaying in your mind, that regret that clings to your spirit, none of it was meant for you to hold on to. Yet you've wrapped your identity around it, believing that if you let it go, you'll lose control. But the truth is, you were never in control to begin with. You've been trying to manage your family, your finances, your future all at once, and it feels like the weight of the world is on your back. You've been strategizing, calculating, and working overtime to make everything fit perfectly. But no matter how much you plan, no matter how hard you push, things still seem to slip through your fingers. And let's be honest, it's tiring to keep pretending that you're okay when you're not. It's exhausting to keep wearing strength like armor when inside you're breaking piece by piece. You've been waiting for someone to notice the struggle, for someone to ask how you're really doing, but no one seems to see it, so you keep carrying it. Because if you put it down, who else will pick it up? But have you ever stopped to ask yourself why you're still holding on? Have you ever questioned why you keep dragging around the weight of past mistakes, broken dreams, and unanswered questions? We often hold on because we think that letting go means giving up. But letting go doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you're careless. It doesn't mean you don't care. Letting go means acknowledging that the weight is too much for you and that it was never your job to carry it alone. The truth is you are human, fragile, limited, and finite. And as long as you keep trying to bear what only the divine can carry, you will continue to crumble under the weight. That burden of fear, release it. That burden of guilt, release it. That burden of control, release it. That burden of needing to have all the answers, release it. Because the more you grip it, the deeper it grips you. The longer you carry it, the more it will carry you into exhaustion, into anxiety, into depression. You don't have to carry that pain anymore. You don't have to solve every problem. You don't have to hold everything together. There is a struggle within the human heart to understand time. We are bound by clocks and calendars, measuring our lives by seconds, minutes, hours, and years. We set deadlines. We make plans. We craft timelines for when things should happen, how they should unfold, and what success should look like. And when things don't happen according to our carefully laid plans, frustration sets in, anxiety creeps in, doubt begins to whisper, maybe it's never going to happen. Maybe God forgot about you. But what we fail to grasp is that God does not operate on our schedules. His ways are higher, his thoughts deeper, and his timing is absolutely perfect. It's not rushed by our impatience, and it's not delayed by our fears. God moves according to his divine plan, orchestrating every moment with precision. While we are stressing over the when, God is perfecting the how and the why. You see, God is not in a hurry. He's not scrambling to make things work. He's not adjusting his plan because of your timeline. He has already seen the end from the beginning. He knew when you would struggle, when you would stumble, and when you would rise. He knew which doors needed to stay closed for your protection and which ones would open in due season. But in our limited vision, we only see the closed doors, the detours, the delays, and we start believing that something has gone wrong. But nothing is wrong. Nothing is broken. Nothing is late. God is not behind schedule. He is aligning things in ways you cannot see. What looks like silence is often God working behind the scenes, setting things in order, preparing the right opportunities, developing your character, and protecting you from battles you're not ready to fight. Sometimes the delay is the blessing. Sometimes the wait is the preparation. You've been asking for the blessing, but are you ready to handle it? You've been praying for the promotion, but can you handle the pressure that comes with it? God is not withholding good from you. He's waiting until you're strong enough to carry the weight of what you've asked for. Think about it. If God gave you what you wanted when you wanted it, would it have lasted? If he had opened that door too soon, would you have been ready to walk through it? There are lessons in the waiting, growth in the stillness, and strength being built in the silence. God's timing doesn't always make sense to us because we're looking for immediate results. We want instant breakthroughs, quick answers, fast solutions. But God is a God of process. He builds layer by layer, piece by piece. What feels like a delay is actually divine development. You prayed for a spouse, but God is still working on you. You asked for a business, but God is still preparing the market. You cried out for healing, but God is still aligning the right doctors, the right treatments, the right moment. What seems slow to you is strategic to God. And while you're waiting, God is protecting you from what you don't even know is coming. That relationship that didn't work out, it wasn't a rejection, it was redirection. That opportunity that slipped through your fingers, it wasn't a loss, it was God's protection. Because what you thought was right for you could have been the very thing that destroyed you. God sees what you cannot see. He knows what you do not know. And so he waits. Not because he wants to punish you, but because he loves you too much to give you something half-baked, unfinished, or premature. Look at creation itself. When God created the world, he didn't rush it. He could have spoken everything into existence in one breath, but he took 6 days. He worked in stages. He created light before he created life. He prepared the land before he placed the living creatures. And on the 7th day, he rested because everything was in its proper place. If God took his time creating the universe, why do we think he would rush his plans for us? Every season has a purpose. Every delay has a reason. Every closed door is a part of the design, but we must trust that God is never early and he is never late. His timing is intentional, purposeful, and always for our good. Even when it feels like nothing is moving, God is moving. Even when it feels like you're stuck, God is shifting things in your favor, but he will not release it until the time is right. Fear is a powerful force that sneaks in quietly, planting seeds of doubt, whispering lies that sound like truth. It disguises itself as logic, as caution, as wisdom. It wraps itself around your mind, tightening its grip until you start questioning everything, your abilities, your worth, your future. Fear has a way of magnifying problems, making mountains out of molehills, turning challenges into impossibilities. It paralyzes dreams, silences voices, and delays destinies. Fear will tell you that you're not enough. It will remind you of every failure, every flaw, every time you tried and came up short. It will replay the moments you stumbled, magnify your mistakes, and convince you that you will never rise above them. Fear is relentless, always pushing you to believe that the worst is coming, that nothing will change, that you are stuck where you are. And yet, faith stands in direct opposition to fear. Faith is bold. Faith speaks when fear says be quiet. Faith moves when fear says stand still. Faith believes when fear insists on doubting. Faith doesn't need to see the way to move forward. It steps out even when the path is unclear. Faith is not blind. It simply trusts that what is unseen is more real than what is seen. But the truth is, faith and fear cannot occupy the same space. One will always overpower the other. Either your faith will rise and push fear out, or fear will grow and suffocate your faith. And too often fear wins because it feels more familiar. It's easier to believe in the possibility of failure than in the promise of victory. It's easier to stay in the boat than to step out onto the water. Fear makes you hold back, hesitate, and settle. It convinces you to lower your expectations, to shrink your vision, to abandon your dreams. It persuades you to live a life of safety rather than a life of purpose. But faith dares to believe in the impossible. Faith says, even if I can't see it, I know it's there. Even if I don't understand it, I trust it's working for my good. Faith is what calls you out of comfort zones. It is what makes you apply for the job you feel unqualified for. Start the business with no resources. Speak up when your voice trembles. Love again after heartbreak and try again after failure. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. It's not built on feelings, but on trust. A trust that God is who he says he is and will do what he promised to do. Fear, on the other hand, thrives in uncertainty. It feeds on the unknown. When answers are delayed, fear begins to whisper, maybe it's not going to happen. Maybe you've misunderstood. Maybe you're not good enough. And if you listen long enough, fear will build walls around you, trapping you in a prison of what ifs and worst case scenarios. But faith speaks louder. Faith says, even if the door hasn't opened yet, I'll keep knocking. Even if the healing hasn't come, I'll keep believing. Even if the answer is delayed, I'll keep trusting. Faith keeps moving forward when fear demands that you retreat. Fear tells you to wait until everything is perfect before you start. Faith says, start now. Even if it's messy, even if it's small, even if it's uncertain. Fear says, what if you fail? Faith answers, what if I succeed? Fear says, stay where it's safe. Faith says, go where you're called. But faith isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet, steady trust, a whisper in the storm saying, keep going. Other times it's a bold declaration standing firm in the face of impossibility. Whether loud or quiet, faith moves. It doesn't wait for fear to leave. It moves in spite of it. You can't wait for fear to disappear before you act. Fear will always find a reason to stay. It will always give you an excuse to wait, to hesitate, to stay in the background. But faith demands action. Faith requires steps. It calls you out of the boat and onto the water, even when the waves are still crashing. Faith over fear is not about never feeling afraid. It's about refusing to let fear control you. It's about acknowledging the fear, but deciding it will not dictate your actions. It's about choosing to believe that what God has placed in you is stronger than what fear is speaking to you. Every major shift in life demands faith. Starting something new, leaving something old, stepping into the unknown, all of it requires you to choose faith over fear. Because fear will always have a voice, but faith gives you the courage to silence it. Faith doesn't promise that the journey will be easy. It doesn't eliminate challenges or remove obstacles. But faith assures you that you are not walking alone. It reminds you that God is with you, guiding your steps, strengthening your heart, and opening doors that no man can shut. And so every day becomes a decision. Will you allow fear to dictate your steps, or will you let faith lead you forward? Will you stay in the shadows of doubt, or will you step into the light of possibility? Will you believe in the limits of your circumstances, or will you trust in the limitless power of God? There are battles raging all around us that our eyes cannot perceive. Invisible wars waged in the spiritual realm, conflicts that go beyond the physical struggles we face every day. While we are consumed with what we can see, our bills stacking up, relationships breaking down, health failing, doors closing, there are forces moving in the unseen, and God is standing at the forefront of those battles. He is fighting for us in ways we could never comprehend, pushing back darkness, dismantling traps, and silencing voices of destruction long before they ever reach us. We often think the fight is in front of us, that the struggle is with people, circumstances, or even ourselves. We exhaust our strength trying to control outcomes, trying to defend our name, trying to fix every problem. But the truth is, some battles are not ours to fight. Some wars are too big, too deep, too complex for human hands to handle. These are the battles that belong to God alone. While you're losing sleep over situations that seem impossible, God is moving behind the scenes, shifting pieces on the chessboard of life, orchestrating a victory that you can't yet see. He's confronting enemies you didn't know you had. He's blocking attacks you weren't even aware were coming. Every detour, every delay, every disruption may very well be God's hand of protection, shielding you from unseen harm. Consider the story of the Israelites at the Red Sea. Pharaoh and his army were charging behind them. The sea stretched endlessly before them, and they were trapped. To their eyes, it looked like defeat was inevitable. But while they panicked, God was already at work. He wasn't scrambling for a solution. He was orchestrating a divine escape. He split the sea wide open, creating a path where there was none, and then drowned the very army that sought to destroy them. They didn't have to lift a sword. They didn't have to fight. God fought for them in a way they could never fight for themselves. How many times has God done the same for you without your knowledge? How many times has danger been near, but you were redirected, delayed, or inconvenienced, not realizing it was God protecting you from destruction? That car accident that almost happened but didn't. That job you desperately wanted but didn't get. That relationship you thought would complete you but ended before it could begin. We only see the loss, but God sees the deliverance. And it's not just about protection, it's about victory. God goes before you and confronts what you cannot confront. He speaks in rooms where your name is being discussed. He intervenes in decisions that could have harmed you. He quiets storms before they ever reach your shore. And even when it seems like the enemy is gaining ground, God is still in control. He allows certain battles not to break you, but to build you, to teach you to trust him even when the fight is invisible. In the book of Job, Satan sought permission to attack Job, and God allowed it, but with limits. The enemy could only go so far, and even in Job's suffering, God was still in control of the outcome. That's how God operates. He sets boundaries that the enemy cannot cross. Even when you feel surrounded, you are never unprotected. God is also fighting internal battles that we don't even recognize. The battles in your mind, the war between fear and faith, between doubt and trust, between anxiety and peace. There are spiritual battles for your identity, your purpose, and your destiny. The enemy knows if he can't destroy you physically, he'll try to defeat you mentally. But God is fighting for your mind, strengthening your spirit, and equipping you with peace that surpasses understanding. Think about the walls of Jericho. God instructed his people not to fight with swords, but to march and shout. It made no sense in the natural, but God wasn't looking for their strength. He was looking for their obedience. And when they obeyed, God caused the walls to fall. No hammer, no weapon, no human strategy, just God fighting the battle his way. There are times when God allows you to see the battle so you can recognize his power, and there are times when he hides the battle so you can experience his protection. Either way, the fight is not always in your hands. He is defending you in spiritual realms, breaking generational curses, canceling demonic assignments, and unlocking doors that no man can shut. Even when you feel alone, you are surrounded by angelic armies. Just as Elisha's servant trembled in fear at the sight of enemy soldiers, Elisha prayed, "Lord, open his eyes that he may see." And suddenly the servant saw the hills filled with horses and chariots of fire. That's the reality we often miss. There are more fighting for us than against us. God doesn't need your strategy. He doesn't need your defense. He doesn't need your fight. What he desires is your trust, because while you are trying to figure it out, God has already worked it out. We live in a world that glorifies control. From a young age, we are taught to take charge of our lives, to plan every step, to fight for what we want, and to hold tightly to the things we value. We grasp, we cling, and we strive, believing that if we can just manage every detail, we can create the life we desire. But what happens when control slips through our fingers? What happens when no matter how hard we try, things don't go according to plan? That's when anxiety creeps in, when frustration builds, when fear takes root. The truth is, peace doesn't come from control. Peace comes through surrender. Surrender is not weakness. It's not giving up. It's not failure. Surrender is the most powerful decision a person can make. It is the act of releasing what was never ours to control and placing it into the hands of the one who holds the universe. It's admitting, I can't do this on my own. I'm not strong enough, wise enough, or capable enough to carry this. And in that release, in that moment of surrender, something shifts. The weight begins to lift. The chaos begins to still. The storm in your mind starts to quiet, because surrender makes room for peace to enter. But surrender doesn't come naturally. We resist it because we fear losing control. We believe that if we let go, things will fall apart. So we grip tighter to relationships that are slipping away, to dreams that aren't unfolding, to plans that are crumbling. We fight to keep things in place, exhausting ourselves in the process. Yet the more we try to control, the more peace escapes us. There is a difference between responsibility and control. Responsibility is doing what you can with what you've been given. Control is trying to force outcomes that were never yours to decide. Surrender acknowledges that while you are responsible for your actions, you are not responsible for every outcome. You can plant the seed, but you cannot make it grow. You can love someone, but you cannot make them stay. You can prepare for opportunities, but you cannot open the doors. True peace comes when you stop wrestling with what you cannot change. It comes when you release the need to have all the answers, when you stop demanding explanations for every delay, every detour, every disappointment. Peace enters when you let go of the timeline you've created for your life and trust that God's timing is better than yours. Think about the ocean. The waves rise and fall, the tides come and go, and yet the ocean is at peace because it surrenders to the rhythm set by the Creator. It doesn't resist the pull of the moon. It doesn't fight against the wind. It moves as it was designed to move. What if we lived the same way? What if we surrendered to the rhythm of God's plan, trusting that even when we don't understand it, it is working for our good? Surrender doesn't mean life will always be easy. It doesn't mean pain will disappear or that storms won't come. But it means you don't have to fight alone. It means you can rest in the middle of the storm because you know who is in control. It means you can face uncertainty without fear because your future isn't in your hands. It's in God's. Look at Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. He was overwhelmed with sorrow, knowing the suffering that awaited him. He prayed, Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done. That is surrender. It's acknowledging the pain, the fear, the uncertainty, and still choosing to trust. And in that surrender, Jesus found the strength to fulfill his purpose. There are things you've been holding on to so tightly, worries about your family, stress about your career, anxiety about your health, fears about the future. You've been carrying burdens that were never yours to bear, and it's wearing you down. But peace is waiting on the other side of surrender. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start trusting. It means you shift from striving to resting, from controlling to trusting, from fearing to believing. It means you release the outcomes, the timelines, the expectations, and you say, God, I trust you more than I trust myself. When you surrender, you free yourself from the constant pressure to figure everything out. You no longer have to pretend to be strong all the time. You don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. You can breathe again. You can rest again. Because surrender invites God to take his rightful place in your life. And with him comes peace that surpasses all understanding. Peace isn't found in the absence of problems. It's found in the presence of trust. It's found when you stop fighting battles that aren't yours and let God fight for you. It's found when you stop running ahead and learn to wait. It's found when you stop questioning every closed door and start thanking God for the protection you cannot see. There is a release that happens when you surrender. The bitterness starts to melt. The anger starts to dissolve. The anxiety starts to fade because surrender clears out the clutter in your heart and makes room for peace to settle in. Imagine the freedom of waking up each day not weighed down by fear of the unknown. Imagine making decisions without being paralyzed by the fear of failure. Imagine living with open hands, ready to receive whatever God has for you, whether it matches your plans or not. That's the peace that comes through surrender. It's steady. It's unwavering. It's not dependent on circumstances. It's not shaken by storms. It's anchored in the confidence that God is for you, that he is with you, and that he is working all things together for your good.